Buying a pre-construction property here in the GTA is not easy, but here's why you should be considering a resale property anyways. So when you're deciding to buy real estate, you have two options. You either buy from a builder, which is a pre-construction or also known as a new construction, or you buy a resale property, which is a property that has already been owned or has been built for X amount of years. So a resale property does have its advantages, but let's talk a little bit about the pre-construction and what's happening in this current market as of May 2024. So right now, we're not seeing a lot of properties selling in the GTA that are pre-construction, and that has a lot to do with the price of, doesn't matter, pre-construction or resale, because it's very unaffordable for people to be getting into the market, let alone a new property which has more costs involved in it, which I'll touch on a little bit later on. But these type of properties here, as good as they are for, people who want to choose their own finishes and just, starting in a new area, which is very valuable to people to know that they're the first person to live in a property. It is not that common to be purchasing these type of properties because of the costs involved. So when you look at the costs involved versus a resale property, you're going to realize that you're actually paying more when you buy a pre-construction property. And that has a lot to do with the costs that are involved with the builder and the costs that they have to take on. And, obviously them doing the math and everything that they have to do to make sense of the price, they have to charge X amount for a home in order to make a profit. So it's not really the builder's fault. It's more so the, costs with the government and things like that for builders as to what's making these prices go so high. And then it has a domino effect in the resale market and vice versa. So builders look at what's being sold in resale to be able to have an idea of what to expect in the pre-construction market. But the problem is when the resale market is as good as it is, which right now it is very expensive, the cost is just so much for these builders that it still does not make sense for them to build and charge what they need to charge in order for them to make properties for people, whether it's condos, freehold properties, low-rise, any of those type of properties. It's very expensive, and that's why we're seeing not many being sold in this market. You gotta also keep in mind that when you buy a pre-construction property, there are risks for delays. And by that, I mean, there's no guarantee that your closing date or the date that you're gonna be taking possession or moving in is gonna be for a certain date once you sign the documents initially. So once the date is set by the builder when you first buy, they have 3 chances or opportunities to be able to change that date because of any delays on their end or any delays that make them need to push that date further. They have 3 shots at it. So once you're past the 3 times, then you as a purchaser can actually back out of the deal and get your deposits back. But sometimes people are so committed into waiting, however long they've been waiting, that they may as well just wait however much longer in order for the property to be built and for them to take possession because maybe the market went up or whatever it is. But these delays are actually very common and you can't do anything about it. As a purchaser, you just have to obviously make sense of your situation and, have to push, selling your property, whatever it is, you need to take care of that on your end. That is not the builder's problem. So these delays that do happen, that's something that you just have to take on when you purchase a pre-construction property and evaluate that risk when you're comparing that to resale. Now, comparing that to a resale property, you got to remember that whenever you buy a resale, you always set the closing date and both the seller and the buyer agree on a certain date. And that's going to be the date that that the purchasers take possession. So this is much more of a standard process that people are used to rather than in pre-construction where there's a little bit of uncertainty of when that closing date is actually going to be. And just rewinding a little bit for the costs that are involved when you're buying a pre-construction property, you have to take into account that there are these extra costs that you have to have for the closing date. And some of those costs can be HST on the property. Here in Ontario, there's HST being charged, especially for investors or people who purchase these properties to sell them right away or sell them within a certain time period. You owe HST on closing to the builder, and that can be $20,000 plus on top of the purchase price that you already committed to. So these are costs that you have to be ready for. And on top of that, you have levy costs. Levy costs can be capped at the time that you purchase a property. And basically what a levy cost can be is basically, let's say, gas lines, electrical, anything that is hard to estimate the price when you buy a pre-construction property, but later on is costs that are involved with the builder. They end up dividending that cost up to each purchaser, and giving that to the purchaser to obviously pay towards. So let's say, they have to run gas lines, electrical, and later on, once it gets closer to the closing date, they know what these costs are. They'll bring those to the purchaser. And if these levies have not been capped at the time that you've purchased, then these are going to be added costs that you are not sure what they're actually going to be for when you have to close. And as complicating as that might be, just basically try and understand it as an added development cost that is not certain at the time that the builders are selling these properties to people who are buying it from a floor plan and things like that. They don't know what the actual costs are going to be. Who knows if the cost of construction goes up by the time they do build. So they don't want to commit to a certain price. They just allow you sometimes to cap the price to be a certain number, or at the time that you close, that's going to be the number that you owe. So these are going to be added costs that you have to budget for, because it's not just like a resale where you have, land transfer tax, lawyer costs, which by the way, all that's added as well to a pre-construction property. But you do have the levy costs, the HST costs, and the worst case scenario is maybe more money being asked by the builder. This is something that's actually more common than people think, where a builder would come to the purchaser and say, we've taken on more costs due to X, Y, and Z. We're now requesting more money to be given to us, or you guys are able to take your deposits back and we can sell these properties to other people. So as shady as that might seem, it actually does happen. And that's a risk that you take on as a purchaser when you're buying pre-construction. Another issue that people go through is the floor plan and the layout not being what they thought it would be by the time when they move in and take possession. So a lot of people, when they buy pre-construction properties, they refer to a floor plan, certain elevations, things like that. And, there's certain measurements, but you got to remember there's certain wordings in those floor plans that allow the builder to change the size of certain rooms or anything like that to be able to fit what they are building. So a lot of these builders are protected in their agreements to be able to change what you did commit to as a purchaser. And now when you take possession, you can't do anything about it. If something is different or maybe not what you intended it to be, that's not going to be the builder's problem. That's something that you have to weigh as a risk when you buy these properties and be able to take that on the chin, for lack of a better term. And that's something that you have to just worry about later on and deal with as you live in the property or as you try and sell that property later on. There's also that chance that the property you buy is just not properly built, that you may have a lemon of a house that now you have to close on and that you have to live in because this is the way that it's being built. So you'll always be protected by DTr&x, which is a home builder warranty system. They're actually a company that works for the builders but allows the purchasers to be able to have defects warranted, and that can be your PDI inspection, which is right before you move in, 30 days of you living in there, 1 year of you living in there, and also 2 years, and also 7 years too. But just to kind of keep it short term, is a 2 year would be the max for a short term period to have certain issues taken care of by the builder because they weren't properly built or wear and tear happens in a property. And the last thing to mention in this video for whenever you buy a pre-construction property is the possibility of ongoing construction in that area. So whenever you buy a resale property, for the most part, you're buying a property that's already been developed, depending on which area you're buying in, but you're not really worrying about construction happening on that street or in that specific pocket. But when you buy pre-construction, this is just something that you have to deal with until that certain phase or location is fully built. And even then, there's other areas in that phase that you may have to deal with for construction, for dust, nails being on the street that you may run over. Like, these are things that are common in a new construction area that as a purchaser, when you're being asked to close and move in, you have to deal with for a certain amount of time. And that could be very stressful, especially for people that are driving in these areas that, again, maybe running over nails constantly or maybe breathing in dust all the time from the work being done. So these are things that you may not have to worry about as much in a resale type of property, but in a pre-construction, it's very common. Thank you guys for watching, and until next time.